Hi, welcome to the bathtub, where when you hear this sound effect, a bunch of screaming guys telling everybody that they're number one at some stupid university somewhere that I shouldn't have said stupid, but I'll get in trouble. Anyway, then you know you're at, and you see this rinky-dink statue, the Pismo Beach Prop Department. I said, spare no expense in producing a lifetime achievement award for the greatest writers of all time. No expense, but it can't cost anything, so I'm not going to give you any money. And they came up with this. It's a bathtub, all bathtub Hall of Fame. One lucky guy or girl every once in a while, when I feel like it, get a look at this award usually from the grave, because most of them are dead. And today, I was going to get a special sound effect for it, but I didn't really get around to it. And the world's so depressing that I think we're all doing good just getting out of bed. We're going to talk about one of my all-time favorite writers. He's long overdue for the All Bathtub Hall of Fame. He's easily one of the greatest writers of all time. He's been dead for a long time, and even though he's been dead, he still entertains us in our bathtubs. Anton Chekhov, one of the greatest short story writers of all time. Many people know him mainly as a playwright, which I think that's possibly true. Some people think of him more as a playwright because of Three Sisters and The Seagull and stuff. And I like his plays. I never loved them as much as short stories. I really think of him as one of the all-time great short story writers. And I just thought we were just going to chat just randomly like we normally do, and say that basically he was one of the greatest writers. He was also supposedly an incredibly nice man, an incredibly kind and good person. He was born in, I was going to look this up, but somewhere in the 1860s or something like that, in Taganrog, which is like very rural Western Russia, I guess, from a family who was descended from serfs, so from slaves, or serfs in the Russian way of dealing with people and having their souls owned by somebody. And his family he came out of a fairly difficult family, like everybody, like all of us have. And especially difficult. And him and his brothers and sisters really worked hard. And he became a doctor, and he became a writer from a very young age. And he started writing lots of short stories. He became attracted to the theater, to the local theater. There was one in Taganrog, I guess or Taganrog, I don't know how to pronounce it. And from what I've been reading, he was attracted to the theatrical life very early, not just because there were cute actresses, who he did like the cute actresses, but he also just loved the stage and the magic of the whole thing. Anyway, he wrote more than 100 short stories. He was known as a really kind man. I wanted to say a few things. First of all, I started reading him in the bathtub this week, and as I do every few years, I guess of all the writers, we've talked about Yeats and Brian Moore. I would say Chekhov is one of those, and Simenon, the writer I go back to more often. Like those writers, I go back to more and more often as I get older, reread him over and over, and like him more and more every time I go through his stuff again. I'm reading at the moment, I started reading this Donald Rayfield. Can you see that on the Kindle? Donald Rayfield biography of Chekhov, which I think is from 2013 or something like that. I forget. Anyway, I think it's a fairly big, substantial book. You can never tell on these Kindles. But I heard some really good reviews of it. I'm going to post links to it. The Los Angeles Review of Books, who are unlike the New York Review of Boring, which is always like every essay sounds like it's written by some doctor as a doctoral dissertation. The Los Angeles Review of Books actually runs some really nice bathtub-worthy essays from here and there. And I guess Dodo's being pretty good, isn't she? And this kind of reminded me how much I wanted to get back to Chekhov. I've been wanting to get back to read him for a long time now. And I started reading this. It's very good reading biography. Just so far, I've only got about 40, 50 pages into it, but I'm enjoying it a lot. So I really recommend it. I also picked up on Kindle. I know we hate Kindle and we hate Amazon. They're bastards. But there's a lot of free stuff on Kindle. The Letters of Anton Chekhov, which also has a biographical essay, which is based on an essay written by his brother Michael. And I enjoyed the essay a lot, the opening essay. And I'm reading some of the letters as I feel like it. What I read this week, I think I talked to you guys about it, is years ago, 30 years ago, when I first moved to London, I started buying these very old Chatto and Windus editions of collected short stories. We were talking to some of our bathing buddies, and who was it? Echo Press, I believe, did big paperback versions and the exact same editions. Yeah, I think they're even the same pages, the same settings. And these were all translated by one of the stalwart translators of all time, particularly for Russian literature, Constance Garnett, whose reputation is always going up and down. When I was young and I was reading all these Russian writers, people were always saying, you can't read Constance Garnett. She's totally terrible and she gets everything wrong. And I really liked Constance Garnett, and I still like Constance Garnett. Cheers, Doda. Doda's being very good. I thought I was going to put it away. No, shush. Cheers to Anton Chekhov. You deserve this. Of all the dead writers, I think I can't think of a better dead writer. I love your work very much, and this is to you. So this great series, the complete set of short stories. I'm sure that they've discovered lots of new ones since then. Doda likes to eat. Look, he likes to bite the hairs off my ears. It's really, really pleasant. This one's called The Schoolmistress and Other Stories. Some of these, I'm pretty sure many of these volumes are actually the first English editions of Chekhov. Don't quote me on it, but some of them are, some of them aren't. Here's The Chorus Girl and Other Stories, The Duel and Other Stories, etc. I've got pretty much the whole set, The Witch and Other Stories, and I've probably read most of these books. The problem with Chekhov is you can't always remember which volume you read. So I picked up The Cherry. There's one of the plays. The Party, one of the great short stories. The Darling, one of my all-time favorite short stories of his. I'm pretty sure this is a first edition. But anyway, these are all done by Constance Garnett, who just translated the hell out of everybody and did a pretty damn good job of it. The Darling. So I go back to these occasionally. And I just pull one pretty much off the shelf. And what I pulled off this week was The Bishop and Other Stories. And The Bishop and Other Stories, I had read this. As I was about 10 pages into it, I knew I'd read this volume. I probably read it 3 or 4 times in the past 30 years. But I went right into it and enjoyed it. These seem like fairly mid to late period Chekhov. As many of you may know, he started off writing really short stories. And I forget, he had a certain trendy magazine that publishes stuff. And they were only like 4 or 5 pages. Very short, kind of funny, dark humor. But he wrote many, many of these stories about people from all walks of life and classes in Russia. Cheers, Doda. I'm going to put you in this thing if you don't be quiet. And they're often sort of looked down upon compared to his mid period to late period work. But as I get older, I read some of these very short early stories show up all the time, and I'm really knocked out by them more and more than I was in the past. I'm going to give you a couple of examples, a couple of shortish stories in here. There's 2 of them. I loved all the stories in this. It has his longest story that I know of called The Step, which is about this young kid being taken off to go to school by his uncle and a priest, and they're on a carriage going across, and all the adventures. It's a long story. It's a little episodic to me. It's a little looser than the Chekhov stories that I love the most, but I enjoyed it. The story that I loved in here was The Letter. It's a 15-20 page story, but all the characters come to life in a Chekhov story, and it's about a guy. He's gone to see his bishop or his religious boss. He's some priest of some sort. And he's saying, my son is living in sin with some married woman, and he doesn't respect me, blah, blah. And the bishop sits him down and says, look, you got to write that kid a letter. And you got to tell him how bad he is, what a bad person he is, and how heaven's very unhappy with him. He's ruining his life. So the bishop helps him write this letter, telling his son what an awful person he is. At the time, there's another man there who's another religious figure who's a drunk and a loser, and he's just had nothing but problems his whole life, and he's always begging for money. And he sits and watches this scene, and then he goes off with the distraught priest, and he says to him, "Don't send that to your son. Send that letter to your son. Your son's having a tough life. He's happy. He sounds like he's happy. Don't make him miserable." It's a wonderful story. And at the end, the priest, it's all about the priest trying to decide whether he should send this letter to his son telling him, stop sleeping with a married woman and so forth. Anyway, that was a great story. And then there's so many good stories, but there's a story called A Nightmare. It sounds like something that Chekhov would have lived with, which is about a man. He's kind of a big landowner somewhere in Russia, and he's got all these serfs and people, and he's responsible for all these souls in his neighborhood. And he says, I'm going to try to do good. Look at all these people suffering. They don't have food. They're unhappy. They work hard. They're suffering. I'm going to try to do something for them. And he starts seeing people and trying to help. He tries to help this one priest who's a mess. And he starts listening, dealing with this person's problems, and realizes they're so insurmountable. They're so insurmountable. And it's just that one guy he's trying to help. And he just it's just about him giving up. A wonderful story. Anyway, I really enjoyed reading this. I read this completely all the way through this past week. And then I went back. I pulled off, I have all the Chekhov, the old editions from Penguin. This is David Magershak. And I get the feeling this is one of the early Penguin editions of Chekhov because it's not from a certain period. It covers all his life, and a lot of the great stories are in here. The stories I remember most, like A Boring Story, and Ward 6, and The Darling, and Lady with Lapdog. So it's almost as close to a best of edition you can get. Magershak is just a wonderful, lucid, transparent. You just don't see anyone translating. You don't see anyone there. It's just got this lovely, clear style, which I think he's better than actually Garnett, but they're both very good. Anyway, I read the first 3 stories of this book, and these are the earlier, weaker stories, and they're incredible stories. I mean, I think I'm enjoying. If it's possible, I'm enjoying this book more than I have enjoyed Chekhov in the past. So I would really there's so many editions of Chekhov. People are always saying, which translation should you get? Just pick one up, and if you like it, read it. If you don't like it, then try somebody else, because it's hard. You need to be patient. You have to have some time. You need a bathtub for Chekhov, definitely. And you can't be reading him for a dissertation or something. You really just need to go with him and let him do everything for you. He'll tell the whole story, and he'll also set you up with some pretty interesting, complicated characters. A lot happens in a short story. So anyway, I'm going to finish reading this. I'm going to continue reading through those other biographies we've talked about, and probably dip in and out of the Constance Garnett. But I just wanted to say this is for you, Anton, Checkie-baby. We love you, and we miss you. And he was supposed to be a wonderful man. I'll try to talk a little bit about some of the amazing things he did. It's amazing how much writing he was able to do. He died at early 40s, was sick his whole life. He had tuberculosis, and wrote wonderful, humane stories. They're very different from Dostoevsky or Tolstoy, who you probably do know, and even Turgenev. And they're a little more realistic, and they're a little more down to earth, and the humanity of them is just almost embracing. You cannot, even the saddest stories he writes, you really feel like he's with you. He's with you. He understands how you feel, if that's possible for any of us. Okay, take care. Happy bathing. We're going to do another very short business episode in about 2 seconds, and we'll do more Chekhov, I think, next week, next few days. Okay.